I stood in the middle of a high-end imported Italian furniture showroom, breathing in the scent of expensive leather and polished mahogany, while watching my daughter-in-law turn the color of spoiled milk as the salesman gently informed her that the credit card had been declined. Quick pause right here. Before we get into the absolute disaster that unfolded next, I want to know where you are listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments right now, because I love seeing how far these stories travel. All right, back to the moment everything changed. I did not smile and I did not flinch when the salesman handed the card back to my son. I just adjusted the strap of my worn-out handbag and let the silence stretch across the massive room. My name is Clara, and for the last 35 years, I have cleaned commercial office buildings on the night shift. I know the smell of industrial ammonia better than I know the scent of my own perfume. I have scrubbed floors, vacuumed miles of ugly corporate carpet, and emptied thousands of trash cans, so my son David could go to a good university and get a job that did not require him to wear rubber gloves. He became a junior architect, and shortly after he married Sylvia. Sylvia is a woman who curates her life like an art gallery, where people like me are not meant to be displayed. I always knew she looked down on me. It was never a secret, but it was always wrapped in this very thin layer of plausible deniability, the kind of cold politeness that leaves you shivering but gives you no actual reason to complain. For the past 3 years, since David started his own small firm, I have been the silent financial foundation of their very loud, very aesthetic lifestyle. When David could not get approved for the lease on their luxury downtown loft, I co-signed and quietly paid the deposit. When his business had a slow quarter, I transferred funds into a joint account to cover their groceries, which somehow always included $40 cheeses and imported wine. I told myself it was an investment in his future. I told myself I was just helping them get on their feet. I told myself a lot of lies until the week of my grandson Leo turning 4. The week it all shattered started on a Tuesday. I was riding the early morning bus back to my small apartment. My knees ached with that deep, dull throb that comes from spending 6 hours pushing a heavy floor buffer. The bus was empty, except for me and a teenager sleeping in the back. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. It was David. His voice was bright and wide awake, completely ignoring the fact that he knew I had just finished a night shift. "Hey, Mom," he said. "I just wanted to remind you about the dinner party this weekend for Leo. We are having a few people over, clients mostly. Sylvia wants everything perfect." I leaned my head against the cold window of the bus. "I will be there," I said. "I found a beautiful gift for him." David hesitated. I could hear the sound of a coffee grinder in the background. "About that, Mom," he continued, "Sylvia was hoping you could just maybe give cash this year. We are trying to keep the loft minimal. You know how she is about clutter. She says plastic toys ruin the vibe." I closed my eyes. "It is not plastic," I told him. "It is a handmade wooden train set, vintage, the kind you used to love." David sighed a heavy, tired sound that made me feel like I was a burden he was forced to carry. "Right. Okay. Just please do not make a big deal out of it. We have important people coming." He hung up before I could reply. I sat on the bus and watched the city wake up, feeling a cold knot forming in my chest. That knot did not loosen for the rest of the week. Saturday evening arrived, and I walked up to their building. It was one of those places with a doorman who looked at my sensible shoes like they were a threat to national security. I carried the wrapped box carefully. I had spent a week tracking down this specific train set. The dinner party was exactly what I expected. The loft smelled of eucalyptus and roasting garlic. There were about 12 people there, all dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. Sylvia glided around the room in a silk dress, pouring wine and laughing loudly. When she saw me, she offered a tight little smile. "Clara," she said, loud enough for the couple next to her to hear, "you made it. You must be so exhausted from all your manual labor. I always tell David how resilient you are, like a workhorse." The couple chuckled politely. My face flushed. It was not a direct insult. It was a paper cut. She specialized in paper cuts. "I am fine, Sylvia," I said, keeping my voice level. "Where is Leo?" She waved a hand vaguely toward the hallway. "In his room, playing quietly. We are keeping the main area adult-focused tonight." I nodded and walked to the room. Leo was sitting on his rug. When he saw me, he jumped up and hugged my legs. I handed him the box. He tore the paper open, and his eyes went wide. He pulled out the solid wood locomotive, running his little fingers over the brass wheels. "Choo-choo," he whispered. I sat on the floor with him for 20 minutes, showing him how the magnetic tracks snapped together. It was the only good part of the night. Eventually, Sylvia appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, crossing her arms. Her eyes swept over the train set, and her nose wrinkled just slightly. "Oh," she said, "wood. How rustic." I stood up, brushing my knees. "It is a classic," I said. "Safe and durable." Sylvia stepped into the room and picked up the red caboose, holding it between two fingers like it was contaminated. "It is very heavy, Clara. Honestly, I worry about him dropping this on his foot. And the paint, are we sure it is non-toxic? You know you cannot really trust things from thrift stores." "It is not from a thrift store," I replied, my voice tight. "It is from a specialty toy maker." She dropped the caboose back into the box. "Right. Well, we will just keep it up on a high shelf until he is older." She looked at Leo. "Say thank you to your grandmother, baby. We need to go back to the guests." The rest of the dinner was a blur of me sitting in the corner while David and Sylvia talked about their upcoming trip to Aspen and their plans to redecorate the living room. Nobody asked about me. Nobody engaged. I was just the silent spectator in a life I was paying for. After dessert, I decided to make myself useful. It is a terrible habit I have. When I feel out of place, I start cleaning. I gathered the empty plates and carried them to the kitchen. I washed them, dried them, and noticed the garbage can was overflowing. Without thinking, I pulled the bag, tied it off, and carried it out the back door to the service hallway where the building trash chute was located. The hallway was brightly lit and completely silent. I set the heavy bag down to open the chute. As I did, the plastic caught on the metal edge and tore open. A few items spilled out onto the concrete floor. Half a lemon, some crumpled napkins, and the wooden red caboose. I froze. I stared at it. I knelt down and pulled the tear in the bag a little wider. The entire wooden train set box and all was shoved at the very bottom, covered in coffee grounds and scraped food. She had not put it on a high shelf. She had not saved it for when he was older. She had waited until I left the room and threw it directly into the garbage. I did not cry. I did not scream. I knelt there on the cold concrete floor of a luxury apartment building and felt the final remaining string of my maternal guilt snap completely in half. It was a very clean break. I picked up the train set, wiped the coffee grounds off the box, and walked back into the apartment. I put my coat on. David caught me by the door. "Leaving already?" he asked, looking distracted. "Yes," I said. I did not hold up the box. I just looked at his face, the face of the boy I scrubbed 1,000 floors for. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. He did not notice anything was wrong. He never did. I walked out and took the train home. I sat at my small kitchen table under the flickering fluorescent light and opened my laptop. I did not do this in a fit of rage. I did it with the cold, mechanical precision of someone who has finally woken up. I logged into the banking portal. I looked at the joint account. The balance was significant. Money I had saved over decades. Money I transferred over so they would not have to worry. I opened a new private account in my name only. I clicked transfer. Every single cent. I left exactly $1 in the joint account, just so it would remain open and active. Then I went to the credit card portal. The card David carried in his wallet was a secondary card tied to my primary line of credit. I clicked Manage Cards. I clicked Deactivate User. The screen prompted me, asking for a reason. I typed the word lost, because he was. I closed the laptop. I went to bed, and for the first time in years, I slept a full 8 hours without waking up anxious. 3 days passed. David called me twice, but I let it go to voicemail. I knew exactly what they were planning to do this week. Sylvia had been talking about it loudly at the dinner party. They were going to order the new dining room furniture, a custom marble table and 8 chairs imported from Italy. It was supposed to be her early birthday present to herself, a statement piece, she called it. I knew how they operated. David would use the joint credit card, expecting my automatic payments to cover the massive balance at the end of the month. Thursday morning, David texted me, "Hey, Mom, going to the design showroom today to finalize the furniture. You should come see it. It is amazing. Plus, they might need the guarantor's signature just to keep the file updated." There it was, the only reason I was invited. He needed the bank in the room. I typed back, "I will meet you there." The showroom was downtown. It was the kind of place where nothing had a price tag, because if you had to ask, you did not belong there. I walked in wearing my usual plain gray sweater and slacks. Sylvia was already sitting at a massive dark stone table, running her hands over the surface like she was petting a cat. David stood next to her, chatting with the salesman. When Sylvia saw me, her smile was instantly strained. "Clara," she said, "I am surprised you came. This really is not your kind of aesthetic." "I wanted to see what you were getting," I said, walking over. I ran my hand over the stone. It felt cold. "It is a beautiful table, very heavy." "It is imported," Sylvia said, lifting her chin. "You really cannot find this level of craftsmanship just anywhere. We are investing in pieces that hold value, not cheap throwaway things." She looked right at me when she said that. She was talking about the train set. She had no idea I had fished it out of her garbage. I just nodded. "Well," the salesman said, clasping his hands together, "if we are all happy with the selection, we can finalize the paperwork. The total comes to $22,500. David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the slim metal credit card. My credit card. He handed it to the salesman with a practiced, casual flick of his wrist. "Put it on this," David said. The salesman took the card, walked over to the sleek terminal on his desk, and inserted it. The machine beeped once. Then it made a low, buzzing sound. The salesman frowned. He pulled the card out, wiped it on his sleeve, and inserted it again. The same buzz echoed in the quiet room. "I apologize, Mr. Whitaker," the salesman said, keeping his voice low. "It seems the card is not processing. A security flag, perhaps?" David chuckled, but it sounded nervous. "That is impossible. There is no limit on that card. Just run it manually." The salesman tapped the screen. He waited. He shook his head. "It is saying declined. The account is suspended." Sylvia stood up, her silk blouse rustling. "Declined? That is ridiculous. David, fix this. This is embarrassing." David pulled out his phone. He opened his banking app. I watched his face. I watched his thumb swipe down to refresh the screen. I watched the blood drain out of his cheeks until he looked like a ghost. He stared at the screen. He tapped it twice like the glass was broken. "The joint account," he whispered. "It is empty. There is $1 in it." Sylvia stepped closer, grabbing his arm. "What are you talking about? Show me." She looked at the screen and gasped. She spun around and looked at me. "Clara, did you get hacked? The money is gone. The card is shut off." I stood there. I did not cross my arms. I did not raise my voice. I looked at the $22,000 table. "I did not get hacked, Sylvia," I said. The silence in the showroom suddenly felt very heavy. The salesman took a step back, pretending to look at a swatch book. David looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, what did you do? Where is the money?" "It is in a private account," I told him, "under my name only, where it belongs." Sylvia's face twisted into a mask of pure outrage. "You took our money? Are you insane?" "We are in the middle of a transaction." "It was never your money, Sylvia," I corrected her gently. "It was my money. Money I made scrubbing toilets and vacuuming hallways so my son could pretend he was rich. Money I gave to help you both. But I am done helping." David stepped forward, reaching a hand out. "Mom, wait. Why? Is this about the dinner? If we did something wrong, just tell us. Do not throw a tantrum and cut us off. We need this table for the networking event next month." "A tantrum?" I repeated, testing the word. "No, David. A tantrum is throwing a beautifully crafted vintage toy into the garbage because it does not fit your aesthetic. This is not a tantrum. This is a resignation. I am resigning as your sponsor." Sylvia gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She finally realized that I knew. "You went through my trash?" she hissed, dropping the polite act entirely. "You snooped in my house?" "I was taking your garbage out for you," I replied, "because you treat me like the help. You always have. You invite me over to serve you, to bring gifts, to applaud your lifestyle. and then you discard me the second I am not useful. Just like you discarded the gift I spent a week finding for my grandson." David looked at Sylvia. "You threw the train set away?" he asked. His voice was weak. He did not sound angry at her. He sounded terrified of the situation. Sylvia crossed her arms, defensive and sharp. "It was a safety hazard, David. It was old wood. I am not letting Leo play with garbage." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say one single word to his wife about respect. He looked at the floor. He looked at the salesman. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom," he finally said, "can we just handle this later? Please just transfer the funds back so we can finish this. We can talk about the toy tonight. I will make her apologize." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "She is not sorry, David. She is just humiliated because the ATM ran out of cash in public. And you are not sorry either. You are just annoyed that your safety net vanished." I turned to the salesman. "They will not be buying the table today," I told him. I turned back to the door and started walking. David ran after me, catching my arm just as I reached the sidewalk. The city air was cold and smelled like exhaust. "Mom, stop," he pleaded. "You cannot just do this. We have bills on auto pay on that account. The loft lease, the car lease. We do not have the liquid cash to cover everything this month." "Then you should return some of those $40 cheeses," I said, pulling my arm out of his grip. "Or maybe ask Sylvia's parents to co-sign your lifestyle. My shifts are over." "You are punishing Leo," he said, trying to use the only weapon he had left. "You are cutting off your own grandson." I stopped and looked him directly in the eyes. "Leo will always have a grandmother. If you need me to babysit, I am there. If you need me to cook him a meal, I am there. But I am no longer funding your delusions of grandeur. You are a grown man. Build your own life." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. My phone blew up for the next 48 hours. Messages from David swinging wildly between apologizing and accusing me of trying to ruin his marriage. Messages from Sylvia telling me I was toxic and controlling. I did not block them. I just put the phone on silent and went to work. I pushed my floor buffer down the empty corporate hallway. The hum of the machine was loud and steady. The floor shone brightly behind me. For the first time in a decade, my shoulders did not feel heavy. I was just a cleaner again, and my money was finally my own. That is the reality people do not want to talk about. When you give and give to people who only take, they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a utility. And the only way to fix a broken utility is to pull the plug. If this story hit a little too close to home, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment below and tell me what boundaries you had to set with ungrateful family members. Do you think I went too far by waiting until they were at the register to cut them off? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts, and make sure to subscribe for more real confessions just like this one.